35 strikes, 115 people dead, all in the Caribbean, all occurring within the last several months, all carried out by American forces. You probably didn't hear about it. On January 8, 2026, Donald Trump told Fox News that the United States would start targeting land operations against the cartels. He claimed that the US had intercepted 97% of the drugs coming in via waterways. But here's what he isn't telling you. We've effectively been at war for months, and now Mexico is the next potential battlefield. The timeline matters and the specifics matter, yet they've largely been buried under stories about border security. In December 2025, Trump officially designated fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction, not merely a drug, a WMD. Think carefully about the implications of that language, what it can justify. From late December through early January, there were 35 confirmed strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. The New York Times reported this. 115 individuals were killed. No arrests, no trials, just strikes. On January the 4th, Delta Force conducted a raid on a compound in Caracas, Venezuela, capturing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. According to the Venezuelan government, over 100 people were killed during that operation. Trump flew them to New York to face charges related to narcotics trafficking. 4 days later, on January 8, 2026, Trump appeared on Fox News and told Sean Hannity directly, "We are going to start now hitting land with regard to the cartels. The cartels are controlling Mexico. From capturing a foreign head of state to threatening military operations in our largest trading partner in a matter of days. That's the reality. But this isn't actually about stopping drugs." The first question to ask, do these strikes actually stop fentanyl? Not even close. Trump's own numbers undermine his claims. He asserts that 97% of drugs entering by sea have been intercepted. Let's assume that's accurate, which is generous given the lack of independent verification. The CDC's preliminary data for the 12 months ending April 2025 shows roughly 76 E500 overdose deaths. That's actually a 25% decrease from the previous year, not an increase. Meanwhile, Trump claimed in that same Fox interview that cartels kill 250,000 to 300,000 Americans annually, a number inflated by 4 times. Why exaggerate? Because the real data does not justify what is about to be done. Here's the core issue. Mexican cartels do not grow fentanyl. They synthesize it from chemical precursors, mostly sourced from China. Destroying cartel labs in Mexico will not stop the flow. Chinese suppliers simply continue shipping the precursors to cartels in Colombia, Guatemala, or even directly to networks in the US. History shows this is predictable. Operation Condor in the 1970s moved marijuana cultivation from Mexico to Colombia. The Merida Initiative, costing $3.5 billion in US funds since 2008, fragmented major cartels into roughly 400 smaller, more violent groups. Eduardo Guerrero at Lantia Intelligence tracks these groups and confirms that fragmentation didn't reduce drugs, it increased violence. If military operations don't actually reduce drug flow, what is their purpose? Look at Venezuela. That raid wasn't truly about Maduro being a drug lord, it was about setting a precedent. In February 2025, Trump designated 6 Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Mexico immediately condemned this, warning it threatened their sovereignty and could be used to justify US military action. By August 2025, Trump signed a directive authorizing US military targeting of any cartel or group labeled as a foreign terrorist organization. No congressional approval, just an executive order. Then, in January 2026, he used that authority to intervene in Venezuela and capture its president. The pattern is clear. Designate, authorize, strike. Mexico's Cartel de Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation Cartel are already on the FTO list. Trump has already signed orders giving the military authority to act against them. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum recognizes the threat. Her statement on January 9th was carefully measured. She said she instructed her Foreign Minister, Juan Ramón Duente, to communicate directly with the US Secretary of State and, if necessary, President Trump, to enhance coordination. Read between the lines. She isn't saying, "Stop." She's saying, "Let's discuss before this escalates." That's the language of someone aware of their vulnerable position. Mexico is America's largest trading partner, surpassing Canada and China. That economic relationship is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, which makes Mexico extremely susceptible to US pressure. Trump knows this. In November 2025, when asked whether he would strike Mexico, he said, "Okay with me, whatever we have to do to stop drugs." Shanebound resisted, insisting there would be no US military action without her consent. In January, Trump framed her caution as fear and weakness, claiming publicly that the cartels are running Mexico, a tactic of psychological pressure. Shanebound has proposed constitutional reforms aimed at strengthening protections against unauthorized foreign interventions. She is explicitly trying to prevent a repeat of what occurred in Venezuela. But there is a complication. Trump designated fentanyl as a WMD in December 2025. With that designation, he can claim that cartel production of fentanyl is equivalent to manufacturing chemical weapons. Under international law, WMD proliferation can justify intervention, even without UN authorization. The implications are enormous. This means that the legal and operational framework for potential strikes in Mexico is already in place. Trump has demonstrated the pattern, designate, authorize, strike, and has already applied it in Venezuela. The combination of Mexico's economic dependence on the US, the perceived threat of WMDs, and existing FTO designations creates a situation where military intervention could be argued as legally defensible in Washington's eyes. Shanebound is aware of the danger, which explains her careful diplomacy and push for legal safeguards. The broader pattern is undeniable. Military strikes don't stop drug production. They enforce a new precedent, reshape power dynamics, and psychologically pressure governments into compliance. The case of Venezuela was a clear demonstration. Trump captured a sitting president under the guise of drug enforcement, setting the stage for potential similar actions elsewhere. With the legal framework now extended to Mexican cartels and the WMD designation, the strategic options for escalation are already codified. All of this is happening while headlines focus on border security, drug seizures, and rhetoric about fighting cartels. The underlying actions, military strikes, executive orders, foreign interventions, have already shifted the geopolitical landscape in the Western Hemisphere. Mexico is on high alert, aware that its proximity and economic entanglements make it especially vulnerable. Any misstep could be framed as justification for military action under the same framework used in Venezuela. The situation demands close scrutiny. What appears to be a war on drugs is, in reality, an operational and legal experiment in redefining intervention rights. By labeling fentanyl a WMD and designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, Trump has created a legal rationale for unilateral military operations beyond borders. History shows that such approaches rarely stop the flow of narcotics, but do alter the balance of power and create long-term instability. In short, what's happening isn't about stopping fentanyl or drugs. It's about establishing authority, redefining precedent, and putting psychological pressure on nations economically and politically dependent on the United States. The capture of Maduro, the threat to Mexico, and the WMD designation all form part of a larger pattern, one that uses military power under the guise of drug enforcement while leveraging economic, legal, and psychological tools to extend influence. It's the Iraq playbook: reclassify the threat, claim imminent danger, strike preemptively. The difference is that Mexico isn't Iraq. It shares a 1,254-mile border with the United States. It's deeply integrated into American supply chains for everything from automobiles to agriculture. Any intervention in Mexico wouldn't be a distant war. It would bring chaos right to our doorstep. That raises the real question: why would Trump risk it? Here's what's being left unsaid on Fox News. Trump's administration just captured a foreign head of state, killed over 100 individuals, and faced almost no meaningful backlash. Even the Republican-controlled Senate's War Powers resolution aiming to block further action in Venezuela is largely symbolic. It won't pass the House, and Trump isn't signing it. He's testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push military operations in Latin America without congressional oversight, UN approval, or constraints from international law. The pattern is unmistakable. Venezuela, Cuba, he's threatened them. Colombia, Greenland, and now Mexico, he's set his sights on all of them. This isn't about drugs, it's about asserting American military dominance in the Western Hemisphere without the normal bureaucratic checks of democracy. Consider what hitting land actually means. US military forces operating inside Mexican territory, potentially deploying thousands of troops to a country of 128 million. It would turn the world's 15th largest economy into an active war zone. The Sinaloa and Jalisco new generation cartels aren't small insurgent groups hiding in caves. They control vast territories embedded in local economies and employ hundreds of thousands of people directly or indirectly. Last year, cartel violence alone killed over 30,000 in Mexico. That's already a war. Trump is proposing to pour gasoline on it. And here's the part that should terrify anyone. Mexico cannot stop him militarily. The Mexican armed forces number roughly 277,000 active personnel. The US, by contrast, has 1.3 million active duty troops and the most advanced military technology in the world. Shanebound's only leverage is economic, and Trump has repeatedly demonstrated he's willing to destroy economic relationships to make a point. So what happens when the strikes begin? Let's examine what hitting land could look like in practice. First scenario, limited strikes. Trump authorizes drone attacks on cartel infrastructure, warehouses, and leadership compounds. Surgical targeted strikes. Here's the issue. Cartels are not isolated. They operate in cities like Culiacan, Guadalajara, and Tijuana. A drone strike on an urban cartel compound guarantees civilian casualties. When civilians die, martyrs are created. Recruitment propaganda spreads, and populations that might have tolerated American pressure are transformed into active resistors. Second scenario, ground operations. US Special Forces deployed to assist the Mexican military in targeting cartels. This is classic Vietnam logic. Advisors gradually become combat troops. Small deployments can escalate into large-scale occupations. Unlike Afghanistan or Iraq, Mexico shares a border with the US. Instability doesn't remain localized. It spills over. Eduardo Galvo, a professor of international relations in Brazil, told Coro Brazilians that any US intervention in Mexico would directly affect American territory. He is being diplomatic. What he means is millions of refugees fleeing north. The border is already strained. Imagine American military operations in Mexico creating a humanitarian catastrophe, sending waves of displaced people toward US territory. Third scenario, and the one rarely discussed, is escalation. Mexican cartels have ties to Chinese precursor chemical manufacturers, Colombian producers, billions in funds, and access to weapons. What happens when they decide fighting back is worth it. Conventional forces would win, but asymmetric attacks, bombings, assassinations, or assaults on infrastructure near the US border are far more likely. Brenda Estan, a geopolitics professor at Mexico's IPD Business School, wrote in Reforma newspaper that the Venezuela raid demonstrated the United States acting as a power establishing order in its immediate neighborhood. That's empire language. Empires always generate resistance. Now let's bring this closer to home. Mexico is America's top trade partner. The US imports $475.6 billion in goods annually. Cars, electronics, food, medical devices. Supply chains run through Mexico. Components manufactured in Querétaro become cars assembled in Michigan. Avocados from Michoacán end up in grocery stores. Tequila from Jalisco, cartel territory, arrives at bars nationwide. Military strikes destabilize those supply chains. Factories close, trade routes become unsafe, and insurance premiums skyrocket. Who pays? American consumers. Inflation isn't only Federal Reserve policy, it's supply chains on fire. Trump is about to do exactly that. Migration is another major consequence. Mexico currently cooperates with the US to manage Central American migration, detaining, deporting, controlling flow. That cooperation vanishes the moment missiles strike Mexican territory. Shanebound has been clear: cooperation yes, subordination no, intervention no, military strikes eliminate cooperation. Without Mexican collaboration, every migrant from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, or Nicaragua heads north unimpeded. The irony is brutal. The same administration claiming to secure the US border is about to trigger a migration crisis that will make 2024 look mild. Here's what you need to understand and watch closely. Trump has established a clear pattern: designate the threat, sign an authorization, execute the strike. He did it in Venezuela, and Mexico is next. The legal framework is in place. FTO designations, WMD classifications, and executive orders authorizing force all set the stage. Shanebound is attempting diplomacy, but her leverage is limited. Mexico's economy is too entangled with the US to credibly threaten decoupling, and military resistance is not viable. Indicators to watch: reports of US military exercises near the Mexican border, increases in drone surveillance, Pentagon statements about cartel infrastructure. When those signs appear, strikes are likely imminent. Once they begin, focus on three metrics: casualty numbers, independent sources, not Pentagon reports, migration flows, ICE detentions, asylum requests, humanitarian corridors, and economic indicators: peso-dollar exchange rate, Mexican market volatility, and disruptions to supply chains dependent on Mexican manufacturing. Those metrics will reveal the reality, not Fox News or the administration's press releases. Trump continues to claim the cartels are running Mexico, but what he isn't admitting is that he is about to exacerbate the problem. Fragmented cartels, civilian casualties, economic collapse, a refugee crisis, all in the name of a drug war that has failed repeatedly over 5 decades. 115 people are already dead in the Caribbean, Maduro is in chains, and the groundwork for something far larger is being laid. The question is no longer if, it's when. And when it happens, remember, it was never truly about fentanyl.